I was 14 when my father sold me to Mrs. Eleanor Vance. Just like that, no beating around the bush. He sold me like you'd sell an animal or a piece of old furniture. For the longest time, I couldn't speak about this. But at 60 years old, there's no point in staying silent anymore. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe, and comment where you are watching from. Your support gives me the strength to keep telling my story. My name is Ethan Miller. I was born in a small town in Kentucky, the kind of place where time seems to stand still and poverty is a faithful companion. My father, Dale Miller, was a day laborer on the tobacco farms, a hard man who became even harder after my mother died, leaving him with me and my two little sisters. Our house was a shack made of old wood with a tin roof. When it rained, the noise was so loud we couldn't even hear our own voices. The floor was packed dirt, and moss grew on the walls during the humid season. We had almost nothing, but at least we had a roof over our heads. I hardly ever went to school. My dad believed I was more useful in the fields than wasting time with books. You don't need to know how to read to work the land, he'd say. Still, I managed to learn things from Mr. Henderson, the town's teacher, who would give me lessons in secret when I could sneak away after work. That day, the one that changed my life forever, started like any other. I got up before dawn, helped load sacks onto a merchant's truck, and was thinking about heading to the river when my dad called me. "Ethan, get over here." I found him sitting at the table with a strange look on his face. "Tomorrow we're going to the city. I found you something with Mrs. Eleanor Vance." The name sounded familiar. People in town talked about her, a wealthy widow who lived in a mansion and had businesses all over the region. They said she had connections to politicians and that her husband had left her a fortune. "What am I going to do there, Dad?" "You're going to live there. They'll give you food, clothes. You can even study if you want." Something in his tone felt wrong, but for a moment, I even got a little excited. A poor kid like me getting a chance to go to the city. "And my sisters? They're staying with me. Mrs. Vance only wants you." That night, as I packed my few belongings into an old bag, my sister Lily, who was 11, watched me from the doorway of our shared room. "Don't go, Ethan," she said in a low voice. "I heard Dad talking to Father Michael. He's not sending you to work." "What are you talking about?" I didn't understand all of it, but the father told him it was immoral and that God wouldn't forgive him. And Dad answered that for the money they were offering, even he would do the same thing. I tried to calm her down. I told her she must have misunderstood, that our Father, despite everything, wouldn't do anything to hurt me. How wrong I was. The next day, dressed in my only decent clothes, we boarded a rickety bus heading to the city. My father was silent, staring out the window. I was nervous, but also excited to see the city, so different from our town. After hours on the road, we arrived at the terminal. My father, who never spent a dime on anything, surprised me by hailing a taxi. It took us through streets that got wider and cleaner, until we reached a neighborhood of enormous houses with pristine lawns and high fences. We stopped in front of a two-story mansion with white walls and an impressive iron gate. My father paid the driver and rang the bell. A woman in a maid's uniform opened it for us. "Mr. Miller, we were expecting you. Please, come in." We walked through a beautiful garden to the front door. I had never seen a house like it. Furniture that gleamed, paintings on the walls, lamps that looked like they were made of gold. It was another world. We were led to a parlor where we waited for a few minutes. My father kept running a hand through his hair, nervous. Then she entered. Mrs. Eleanor Vance was a woman of about 45, but she looked younger. Her hair was dyed a deep black, and she was impeccably dressed, with jewels that sparkled with every movement. Her eyes, small and shrewd, scanned me from head to toe, as if evaluating me. "So, this is the boy," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Come closer, child. Let me get a better look at you." I approached, intimidated. She took my face in her cold fingers, turning it from one side to the other like someone examining a horse for sale. "He's younger than you told me on the phone, Dale, but he has a good face. He's thin, but good food will fix that." I felt like an object, not a person. It was my first red flag. "Well, as we agreed, the initial payment will be today, and the rest in monthly installments for 1 year. Mr. Wallace has the documents ready." My father nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Documents? What documents, Dad?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. It was Mrs. Vance who answered. The papers for you to legally live under my guardianship, of course, and the other, more private documents. I didn't understand what was happening. Are you leaving me here, Dad? My father finally looked at me, but only for a second. It's what's best for you, Ethan. You'll have opportunities here I could never give you. A man in a suit entered with a folder full of papers. I watched my father sign document after document. With every signature, I felt my life being torn apart. Mrs. Vance handed my father a thick envelope. He opened it and quickly counted the bills. Then he stood up, gave me a pat on the shoulder, and said, "Behave yourself and obey Mrs. Vance in everything." And just like that, he left. No hug, no words of comfort, just a quick glance before he walked out the door. I wouldn't see him again for many years. When the sound of the door closing faded, Mrs. Vance approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, Ethan, you're part of this house now. Dolores will show you to your room and explain your responsibilities." The maid who had let us in motioned for me to follow her. We went up a marble staircase to the second floor. We passed down a long hallway to a small room at the very back. "This will be your room," Dolores said, opening the door. It was a simple room, but luxurious compared to what I knew. A single bed with clean sheets, a wardrobe, a desk with a lamp. There was a window that looked out onto the back garden. "Leave your things and take a shower. The madam wants you to have dinner with her tonight. I'll bring you some suitable clothes." When Dolores left, I sat on the bed, stunned by everything that had happened. What kind of guardianship was this? Why had my father received money? My sister's words echoed in my head. Dolores returned with fine clothes that seemed to be my size, though I'd never worn anything like them. She showed me where the bathroom was and left me alone again. The bathroom was another world. Hot water pouring from shiny faucets, soft towels, soaps with strange scents. After showering and dressing in those odd clothes, Dolores took me to the dining room. It was a huge room with a long table that could easily seat 20 people. Mrs. Vance was already seated at the head. She motioned for me to sit to her right. The servants began bringing out dishes I couldn't even name. Food I had never tasted, served on china that looked like it belonged in a museum. "You must have many questions, Ethan," Mrs. Vance said as she delicately cut a piece of meat. "I'll explain your situation. My husband, may he rest in peace, was much older than me. He left me his entire fortune 5 years ago, but with a peculiar condition in his will." She paused to take a sip of wine. "To maintain total control over the companies and properties, I must be married. A family tradition," she explained. "However, I don't want a husband who will try to control me or take what's mine. I need someone manageable, someone young who I can mold to my liking." A shiver ran down my spine. I was beginning to understand. "Your father and I came to an agreement that benefits us both. He receives a considerable sum of money, and I get a companion who will fulfill the legal requirement. Are you saying—" I couldn't finish the question. It was too horrible to put into words. "We will be married in 2 weeks. It will be a small ceremony, of course. Mr. Wallace has arranged everything with the judge. Legally, you will appear to be 18. And Father Ignacio, an old friend, will give his blessing without asking any uncomfortable questions." I felt the floor open up beneath me. My father hadn't sent me to work. He had sold me as a husband to a woman who could be my mother. "You can't force me," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll run away." Mrs. Vance smiled, this time with genuine amusement in her eyes. "You can try, of course, but you should know I have arrangements with the local police. If you run, you'll be charged with theft. Besides, where would you go? Back to your father? He's already spent part of the money, and I understand your sisters need to eat." It was a perfect trap, a cage that was invisible but impossible to break. "Don't worry, Ethan. I'll treat you well if you behave. You'll have everything you need, clothes, food. You can even study if you want. You just have to fulfill your marital obligations when I require them." That night in my new room, I cried silently until I fell asleep. I had lost my freedom, my childhood, everything. And the worst was yet to come. The next day, Dolores woke me early. She explained the house routine and my new responsibilities. Mrs. Vance was strict with schedules and expected total obedience. The madam has her quirks, Dolores told me as she helped me dress. But if you please her, she's not so bad. Young Ryan, the one who was here before you, lasted almost 3 years. Before me? There were others? Dolores seemed to realize she'd said too much. I shouldn't have said that, forget it. But I couldn't forget it. How many boys like me had passed through this house? What had happened to them? Over the next few days, I learned to move through that mansion like a shadow. Mrs. Vance introduced me to the other servants as her nephew who had come to live with her, but from the way they looked at me, it was obvious they knew the truth. One afternoon, while Mrs. Vance was out at a meeting, I dared to speak with Dolores again. What happened to the other boys? To Ryan? Dolores looked around, making sure we were alone. You shouldn't ask those things, child. It's not good for you to know. Please, I need to understand what's going to happen to me. Dolores sighed. The madam gets tired of them eventually, when they get too old or become problematic. They disappear. Some end up working in her factories down south. Others, you just never hear from them again. The horror of my situation hit me with its full force. I wasn't just a prisoner now. My future was sealed. I was disposable, replaceable. That evening at dinner, Mrs. Vance informed me that our wedding would be in 10 days. My dress is ready. The invitations have been sent to a small circle of trusted friends. You'll be my 5th husband, you know, she said, as if she were talking about the weather. My late husband's businesses require a certain marital continuity. It's just a legal formality, but a necessary one. What happened to the others? I dared to ask. They grew up. They became inconvenient. Youth is what I value, Ethan. Innocence. When that's lost, it's time to make changes. Her words were like knives. I understood that my time in this house had an expiration date. It was only a matter of when I, too, would become inconvenient. That night, I made a decision. I would not become another victim of Eleanor Vance. Somehow, I would find a way to escape. But first, I needed to learn more about this woman, about her network, about her businesses. If I was going to survive, I had to be smarter than her. The following days were a strange mix of luxury and terror. Mrs. Vance treated me like a doll, dressing me in fine clothes, feeding me food I'd never tasted, and teaching me table manners, how to speak, even how to stand up straight. All this while the date of our wedding approached like a death sentence. One morning, Mrs. Vance took me to a room I hadn't seen before. It was her private office, filled with file cabinets, a large desk, and a computer, which was an extraordinary luxury back then. I need you to sign these documents, she said, pointing to a stack of papers. They're legal formalities for our marriage. I looked at the papers without understanding a thing. I could barely read and write, and these documents were filled with words I'd never seen. What do they say? I asked, holding the pen with a trembling hand. Nothing important. They just confirm you're of legal age and consent to the marriage. There are also some documents about properties and inheritance, but that doesn't concern you. I knew she was lying. What else could a 14-year-old kid do? I signed where she told me, each signature sealing my fate a little more. Excellent, she said when I finished. Now I need you to accompany me to meet some important people. You must make a good impression. That afternoon, she took me to an exclusive club downtown, a place with men in suits and elegant women sipping expensive drinks. She introduced me as her nephew, who would soon become her legal ward due to a family tragedy. Mrs. Vance's friends looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and something darker I couldn't identify then. Now, with the years behind me, I recognized that look. It was complicity. They all knew what was happening, but no one said a thing. This is Judge Navarro. Mrs. Vance introduced me to an older, stern-looking man. He will be officiating our legal situation next week. The judge looked me up and down and smiled. A lucky boy. Mrs. Vance is very generous with her protégés. I felt sick. How many people were involved in this network? How many officials, judges, and authorities had been bought? Back at the mansion, Mrs. Vance seemed pleased. You behaved well. It's important that my friends accept you. Some of them can be problematic if they feel something isn't right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about my situation. How could I escape from a woman who had judges and police in her pocket? Where would I go? Who would believe me? The next morning, as I was eating breakfast alone in the dining room, Dolores approached with a worried expression. "Be careful, child," she whispered while pouring coffee. "The madam has a visitor this afternoon. Mr. Wallace is coming with some important documents." "The lawyer, what's so special about him?" "It's not just about the papers. Sometimes he brings gifts for the madam. Gifts like you." A shiver ran down my spine. "Other boys?" Dolores nodded almost imperceptibly. "If you can, stay in your room and pretend to be sick. You don't want her comparing you to the new merchandise." And so I did. When Mrs. Vance came looking for me, she found me in bed, faking a fever. "How inconvenient," she said, clearly annoyed. "I had plans to introduce you to someone important." "I'm sorry, my head hurts so much," I lied, sweating from fear more than any illness. She left me alone, but not before warning me that she expected me to be recovered for dinner. I waited a few minutes after she left and crept to the door. From there, I could hear voices coming from downstairs. With the utmost care, I slipped out of my room and approached the stairs. I peeked just enough to see without being seen. In the main hall were Mrs. Vance, Mr. Wallace the lawyer, and a man I didn't know, elegantly dressed. Between them stood a boy smaller than me, maybe 12 years old. He had the same lost expression I must have had just days ago. "The boy meets all your requirements, Eleanor," Wallace was saying. "Needy family, no father. The mother is desperate for money. No one will come looking for him." "He's too small," Mrs. Vance replied, sizing up the child like one would inspect livestock. "And he looks sickly." "But it's what you wanted, isn't it? Young, manageable, no connections, and the price is excellent." I was frozen. I was witnessing the same transaction my father had made with me. This boy would be another victim if I didn't do something. The unknown man chimed in. "I have two other candidates if this one doesn't convince you. Boys from good families fallen on hard times. Parents died in accidents. More expensive, of course, but better educated." "Let me think about it," Mrs. Vance said. "In the meantime, Ethan is proving adequate. If he remains obedient, perhaps I won't need a replacement so soon." I felt a mix of relief and horror. The boy in front of them would get a reprieve. But at what cost? My continued submission, my becoming the compliant husband Mrs. Vance wanted. I returned to my room without a sound, my head spinning. I had to find a way to escape, not just for me, but for that boy and for the ones who would come after. But I needed a plan, something more than just running. That afternoon, when Mrs. Vance came to check on me, I pretended to feel better. "I'm glad," she said with a cold smile. "Tomorrow we have a fitting for your wedding suit, and the day after an important dinner with business partners. I want you to make a good impression." "Can I ask you something?" I dared to say. "Of course, my dear." "Why me? Why not find a normal husband? You're a beautiful woman with money. You could have anyone." It was a blatant lie, but I needed to better understand her motivation. Mrs. Vance sat on the edge of my bed. For a moment, her mask of coldness cracked slightly. "Normal men, as you call them want control. They want my money, my properties, my power. My late husband was 40 years older than me. I was married to him at 16, sold by my aunt after I was orphaned. I was shocked by this revelation. She had been a victim too. I spent years putting up with an old man who treated me like an object. When he died, I swore that never again would a man have power over me. Boys like you are perfect. Young, malleable, grateful for the comforts I provide. And when they grow up and start getting ideas of their own," she left the sentence unfinished, but the message was clear. "What happens to the others when they grow up?" I asked, trembling inside. Her smile returned, colder than ever. "Some work in my factories down south. Others I find alternative uses for. Don't worry about that now. If you're obedient, you'll be here for several years." She stood up and stroked my cheek with her icy fingers. "Rest. I need you recovered for tomorrow." When she left, I stared at the ceiling, processing what I had just heard. Mrs. Vance had been a victim who became a victimizer. Her trauma didn't justify her actions, but it explained some of her twisted worldview. The next day, as promised, a tailor came to take my measurements for a suit. I felt like a man on death row being prepped for his execution. Every measurement, every adjustment, brought me closer to that forced marriage. "Youngest groom I've ever dressed," the tailor commented as he worked. "The madam has peculiar tastes." I bit my tongue to keep from responding. The man knew exactly what was happening, and still he collaborated. That night at dinner, Mrs. Vance informed me that the wedding would take place in 5 days. It would be a small ceremony at her house with only trusted friends. Judge Navarro would officiate, and Father Ignacio would give a discreet blessing. "And if I refuse?" I asked, finding a courage I didn't know I had. Mrs. Vance set down her wineglass with studied calm. "That would be very unfortunate, Ethan. I understand your father has already spent a good portion of the money I gave him. If you break our agreement, I would have to demand immediate repayment. And since he can't pay, what would happen? I have contacts in the prosecutor's office. They could find evidence that your father is involved in illicit activities. Smuggling, perhaps, or something worse. He would spend many years in prison. And your sisters? Well, the state foster system isn't the best place for little girls, is it?" It was perfect blackmail. My father deserved to be in jail for selling me, but my sisters were innocent. "I don't want my sisters to suffer," I finally said. "Then you'll be a good husband, won't you?" Her smile was that of a predator who knows its prey is cornered. The next few days passed in a nightmare haze. Suit fittings, ceremony rehearsals, instructions on how to behave. I moved like a robot, desperately searching for an escape I couldn't find. One afternoon, while Mrs. Vance was out at a meeting, I found Dolores cleaning the private office. The door was open, which was unusual. "The madam forgot to lock it," Dolores said, noticing my gaze. "I'm taking the opportunity to do a deep clean." "Can I help?" I asked, seeing an opportunity. Dolores hesitated. "All right, but don't touch anything important." I entered the office and pretended to help with the cleaning while discreetly observing the documents on the desk. There were legal papers, bank statements, photographs. My eyes stopped on a folder with my name on it. When Dolores stepped out for a moment to get more cleaning supplies, I rushed to open it. Inside were copies of the documents I had signed days before. As I read them, my blood ran cold. I hadn't just consented to the marriage. I had signed a will leaving all my future possessions to Mrs. Vance in the event of my death. There was another, even more disturbing document, a confession where I admitted to stealing jewelry from Mrs. Vance, but she was generously deciding not to press charges. It was a perfect trap. If I tried to escape, she could accuse me of theft. If I tried to report her, who would believe a confessed thief? And if anything happened to me, she would inherit anything in my name. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly closed the folder, returning to my cleaning task. Dolores came in and looked at me suspiciously. "We're done in here. Go to your room before the madam gets back." That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, reviewing my options. I couldn't stay and become this woman's husband. I couldn't escape without proof of what was happening, and I couldn't let my sisters suffer the consequences. I needed outside help, someone who would believe me and had the power to confront Mrs. Vance. But who? All her friends were bought. The local police were on her payroll. The judges owed her favors. Then I remembered something I'd seen in the office. A newspaper left open to a page mentioning a new state police captain recently transferred to the region, Captain Evans. A man, according to the article, with a reputation for being incorruptible and determined to clean up local corruption. It was a long shot, but it was the only one I had. If I could contact this Captain Evans, if I could show him proof of what Mrs. Vance was doing, but I needed that proof, and I needed to find a way out of the mansion undetected. The next day during breakfast, Mrs. Vance informed me that she would be out all day. She had important meetings related to her businesses and wouldn't be back until late. "I want you to be ready for dinner," she told me. "Father Ignacio is coming to discuss the final details of our ceremony." When she left, I waited a reasonable amount of time and then looked for Dolores. I found her in the kitchen, preparing the day's meals. "Dolores, I need your help," I said in a low voice. "I can't help you escape, child. I already told you. They would find us, and the consequences would be terrible. It's not that I need to use a phone, just one call." Dolores looked at me suspiciously. "Who do you want to call?" "My sisters. I just want to know if they're okay." It was a lie, but I needed her compassion. Dolores sighed. There's a phone in the foyer. You can use it, but be quick. If any of the other servants see you, we're in trouble. I went to the please. Help me. Another silence. Then, hold on one moment. The seconds dragged on as I waited. Finally, a masculine, authoritative voice answered. This is Captain Evans. Who are you, and what do you know about child trafficking? My name is Ethan Miller, I repeated, the words tumbling out. My father sold me to Mrs. Eleanor Vance 2 weeks ago. She's planning to marry me even though I'm only 14. She has fake documents. She's bought a judge, and I'm not the first one. There have been other boys before me. Where are you now? He asked, his tone shifting to one of urgency. In her mansion, in the Palm Gardens neighborhood on... I couldn't finish. I felt a hand snatch the phone from me. It was Dolores, pale as a ghost. What did you do? She whispered in horror. Who did you call? Someone who can help us, all of us. Dolores hung up the phone with trembling hands. They're going to kill us. The madam has eyes and ears everywhere. If she finds out, she won't find out unless someone tells her, I replied, looking her straight in the eye. Our gazes met in a moment of mutual understanding. She was a prisoner in her own way too, trapped by fear and necessity. Go to your room, she finally said. I never saw you use the phone. That night, during dinner with Mrs. Vance and Father Ignacio, I maintained a calm I didn't feel. The priest, a kind-looking man with an evasive gaze, explained the details of the ceremony that would take place in 3 days. It will be something intimate but meaningful, he said, avoiding my eyes. A special blessing adapted to your particular circumstances. The boy is nervous, Mrs. Vance commented, squeezing my hand with excessive force. But I'm sure everything will go perfectly. Right, Ethan? I nodded silently, thinking about the call I had made. Had Captain Evans believed me? Would he investigate, or was he just another official in Mrs. Vance's pocket? I could only wait and keep up the appearance of submission. For now, my survival depended on it. The next morning dawned with a tension in the air you could almost touch. There were only 2 days left until the wedding, and I was torn between the hope that Captain Evans had believed me and the terror that Mrs. Vance would discover my call. During breakfast, Mrs. Vance seemed particularly irritable. She spoke on the phone in a low voice, moving away whenever I came near. I heard her mention unexpected problems and a change of plans. Something was happening. When she finished her call, she approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan, my dear, something has come up. We'll be moving our ceremony up to tomorrow. Panic seized me. Tomorrow? But I thought it was in 2 days. Plans changed. The judge is only available tomorrow, and we can't afford to wait. She was lying. Something had alarmed her, and now she wanted to rush everything before anyone could intervene. Had she heard about my call? Or was Captain Evans already asking questions in the area? Dolores will help you with the final preparations, Mrs. Vance continued, and this afternoon, Mr. Wallace will be by with the last documents we need. She barely nodded and then left in a hurry. I watched her giving orders to all the servants, making calls, organizing everything to move the ceremony up. I found Dolores as soon as I could. She was alone in the laundry room. What's happening? I asked in a low voice. Why the sudden change? Dolores looked around, ensuring no one could hear us. 2 men came by this morning asking for the madam. They weren't local cops. They were state police. They asked about her businesses and mentioned something about verifying the status of minors under her guardianship. My heart leaped. Captain Evans had acted. What did they say? The butler handled them. He told them the madam wasn't in and to come back with a warrant. But as soon as they left, he called her. I've never seen her so agitated. That explained the rush to move up the wedding. Once we were married, even with fake documents, Mrs. Vance would have more control over me and could claim everything was legal. Do you think they'll come back? I asked, feeling a spark of hope. I don't know, but the madam is already pulling strings. She's called the judge, the lawyer, even a commander from the local police. She's covering her tracks. I stood there thinking. I needed to buy time, and I also needed more proof. If Captain Evans came back with a warrant, he'd have to find something undeniable. Dolores, where does Mrs. Vance keep her most important documents? Not the ones in the office, but the ones she really doesn't want anyone to see. Dolores paled. You shouldn't ask that. It's dangerous. Please, you've been here a long time. You know what she's doing is wrong. You've seen other boys go through the same thing I am." I saw her hesitate, the conflict clear on her face. Finally, she sighed. "There's a safe behind the large painting in her bedroom. I've seen her open it when she thinks no one is watching. She keeps her most important papers there. Jewels, cash. Do you know the combination?" "No, I've never been able to see it. And even if I did, what would you do? You can't get into her room. It's always locked when she's not there." She was right. I needed another way to get proof. And her phone, her computer? She always carries them with her, and the computer in the office is password protected. I was at a dead end. Without solid proof, it would be my word against that of a powerful woman with judges and police on her payroll. That afternoon, Mr. Wallace arrived with more documents. I was forced to sign more papers I barely understood. When I asked what they were, Mrs. Vance answered impatiently, "They're minor adjustments to our marriage agreement. Don't worry about the legal details." After Wallace left, Mrs. Vance took me to the main hall, where servants were already arranging everything for the next day's ceremony. "It will be intimate but elegant," she said, pointing out where the flowers would go, where the judge would stand, where we would be. "Only our closest friends will come, those who understand our special situation." Accomplices, I thought, people as corrupt as she was. And after the wedding, I dared to ask, "What will happen to me?" She looked at me with that cold smile I had learned to fear. "You will continue to live here, of course, as my official husband. You will have certain duties to perform, but also privileges. You can study if you wish. You'll have fine clothes, excellent food. As long as you are obedient, I will treat you well." "And if I'm not?" Her expression hardened. "You don't want to find out, Ethan. The boys who tried to defy me ended up in situations far worse than yours. Some are working in deplorable conditions in my factories. Others simply disappeared." It wasn't an empty threat. She said it like she was commenting on the weather with absolute nonchalance. That night, locked in my room, desperation consumed me. Time was running out. Tomorrow was the wedding, and after that it would be practically impossible to escape. Around midnight, when the house was silent, I heard a soft knock on my door. It was Dolores, pale and trembling. "The madam left," she whispered. "An emergency with one of her businesses. Mr. Wallace came to get her an hour ago." "When will she be back?" "I don't know, but she left instructions that no one is to leave the house, and that you, especially, are to stay in your room." It was a chance I couldn't waste. "I need to get into her office, to look for proof." Dolores shook her head. "It's too dangerous. If they find us. If I don't do this, I'm marrying her tomorrow, and it will all be over." Dolores hesitated for a moment, then pulled a key from her pocket. "This opens the office. The madam has the only copy, but the butler keeps a duplicate for emergencies." I took it when he went out on an errand. I took the key with shaking hands. "Thank you, Dolores. Be careful. The security guard makes rounds every hour. His next one is in 20 minutes. You have that much time to find what you need and get back to your room." With my heart pounding like a drum, I slipped through the dark hallways to the office. The key turned smoothly, and I entered, closing the door softly behind me. The office was dark. I turned on a small desk lamp, just enough to see without the light being noticed from outside. I began to search frantically through the file cabinets, the desk, the drawers. I found folders with names. Some I recognized from conversations. Boys who had been there before me. There were photographs, fake IDs, marriage certificates, and something more disturbing. Letters where parents or guardians signed over minors in exchange for money, just as my father had done with me. It was a pattern. Mrs. Vance had been doing this for years. She bought boys, turned them into her temporary husbands, and when they grew up or became problematic, she discarded them. Then I saw something that froze my blood, a file with photos of graves, with names that matched some of the boys in the other folders. Not all of them had ended up in the factories. Some of them were dead. With trembling hands, I took all the evidence I could find and stuffed it into my shirt. I had to get out of there, find a way to get this to Captain Evans. Just as I was about to leave, the office door flew open. The main light switched on, blinding me for a moment. It was Mrs. Vance, her face an expression I had never seen before. Pure hatred, pure fury. "So here you are, you little rat," she said, her voice like ice. "I knew you'd try something. That's why I came back early." Behind her stood the security guard, a burly man with a grim face. Going through my private documents, stealing, spying. Every word was like a whip. "And to think I was going to give you a privileged life. Like the one you gave the others," I shot back, finding courage in my desperation. "The ones who are dead now?" Her expression flickered for an instant, surprised that I knew that detail. Then she regained her mask of coldness. "You know nothing, you stupid boy. You don't understand how the world works." "I know enough. I know you buy children. I know you forge documents. I know you have accomplices in the government." Mrs. Vance stepped toward me menacingly. "And who do you think cares? You think anyone will believe you? I am a respected woman in this community. I have powerful friends. You are a nobody. The state police will believe me. Captain Evans." I saw fear flash across her face. So she knew who Evans was, and she feared him. "It was you," she said in a low voice. "You called him, and he'll be back with a warrant." Mrs. Vance seemed to consider her options. Then she turned to the guard. "Take him to the basement. Make sure he can't escape. I'll deal with him tomorrow." The guard advanced, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I shoved the desk lamp at him, creating a moment of confusion, and bolted for the door. But Mrs. Vance was faster. She grabbed my arm with a strength that was surprising for a woman her age. "Not so fast," she yelled, digging her nails into my skin. We struggled. The documents I had hidden in my shirt fell to the floor. The guard recovered and grabbed me from behind. I felt a sharp blow to my head and everything went black. I woke up in total darkness. The air was damp and cold. My head throbbed where I'd been hit. Slowly, my eyes adjusted to the gloom, and I could make out that I was in some kind of cellar or basement. There were stacked boxes, old furniture covered in sheets, the smell of mold and confinement. I tried to move and discovered I was tied to a chair. The ropes were so tight they were cutting off the circulation in my wrists. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding strange in the enclosed space. "Is anyone there?" Only silence answered. I didn't know how much time had passed. Hours? A whole day? The wedding was supposed to be today. Maybe it had already happened. With no windows, no light, I had lost all sense of time. I struggled against the ropes, but they were too tight. The more I fought, the more they bit into my skin. Then I heard footsteps approaching. A door opened somewhere behind me, and the beam of a flashlight momentarily blinded me. "You're awake," said the voice of Mrs. Vance. "Good. We need to talk." She came closer and placed the flashlight on a nearby table, partially illuminating the basement. I saw her face, a mask of cold determination. "You have made things very complicated, Ethan. Very complicated. What are you going to do with me?" That is the question, isn't it? My first instinct was to get rid of you, as I have with other problems. But your call to the state police has complicated everything. Now there are questions, investigations. If you disappear, suspicions will grow. She paced in front of me, thoughtful. Luckily, I have a backup plan. I always have backup plans. What plan? I'm going to send you away. Far away. I have a farm down south near the Mexican border. No one will find you there. You will work until you pay back every cent I gave your father, plus interest for the trouble you have caused me. That should take you years, I'd calculate. Decades. Exactly, she smiled. By the time you're done, if you ever are, you'll be a broken old man. No one will remember the boy you were. No one will look for you. The horror of that prospect hit me with its full force. Decades of forced labor, isolated from the world, with no hope of freedom. They'll come for you tonight, she continued. They'll take you in a truck with other workers. Don't try to escape or scream. My men are not as kind as I am. And what happens when Captain Evans comes looking for me? I'll tell him you ran away, that you were a troubled boy who stole jewelry and money before you fled. I have the confession you signed, remember? And witnesses who will confirm my version. It was a perfect plan. With my disappearance, suspicion might fall on me instead of her. Enjoy your last hours here, she said, picking up the flashlight. Compared to what awaits you, this basement will seem like a palace. She left, plunging me back into darkness. Despair consumed me. I had been so close to getting help, to exposing her crimes, and now everything was lost. I don't know how much time passed. Without light, without references, the minutes stretched into hours. Exhaustion eventually overcame me, and I fell into a restless sleep, plagued by nightmares of being chained, working in endless fields under a scorching sun. I was awakened by the sound of the door opening again. I expected to see the men who would take me to my final destination, but to my surprise, it was Dolores who entered, holding a flashlight in one hand and a knife in the other. "There isn't much time," she whispered, rushing over to cut my bonds. "The madam left an hour ago to meet with Mr. Wallace to arrange your transfer. The guards are distracted. This is our only chance." As she cut the ropes, she explained hurriedly, "When they found you weren't in your room, she thought I had helped you. She questioned me, threatened me, but in the end, she believed me when I said I knew nothing." My hands came free, and I rubbed my aching wrists. "Why are you helping me now? It's too dangerous for you." Dolores looked away. "I've seen too many boys pass through this house. I've kept silent for too long. Some of them didn't make it out alive. I can't have another death on my conscience." I staggered to my feet, my legs numb after so many hours tied up. "How will we get out?" "There's a service door that leads to the back garden. We use it to take out the trash. I'll take you there. After that, you're on your own." I followed Dolores through the labyrinth of basement corridors. We climbed a narrow staircase and reached the kitchen. It was deserted, which was strange for such a large house. "Where is everyone?" I whispered. "The madam fired half the staff this morning, said it was a necessary adjustment. I think she's preparing to disappear herself if things get complicated." We crossed the kitchen and came to a small metal door. Dolores opened it carefully and peeked out. "The garden guard is at the main gate. You have to run to the fence at the back. There's a hole behind the large rose bush. You can get out there." She handed me a small bundle. "It's some food and money. Not much, but it'll help you get into the city." I looked at her with gratitude. "Come with me, Dolores. She'll know you helped me." She shook her head. "I can't. My family depends on this job. Besides, someone has to stay behind to distract the guards. I'll give you a few minutes before I raise the alarm." There was no time to argue. I gave her a quick hug and got ready to run. "Wait," Dolores said, pulling something from her pocket. "I found this in the office after they took you. I think it's important." It was a small black ledger. I flipped through it quickly and saw names, dates, amounts, a record of all of Mrs. Vance's transactions. Children purchased, officials bribed, illegal businesses. It was her secret account book, she explained. She kept it separate from the official records. It was all there. It was the proof I needed. I tucked the book into my clothes and prepared to flee. "Thank you, Dolores. If I make it to the state police, I'll come back for you. I promise." "Just run and don't look back," she replied. "Godspeed, child." With those words, I stepped out into the night garden and ran like I had never run before in my life, towards freedom, towards justice, towards an uncertain but my own future. I ran through the darkness, guided only by the moonlight. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. Every sound made me jump. The snap of a twig, the distant howl of a deer, the wind in the trees. Behind me, Mrs. Vance's mansion grew smaller and smaller, but its shadow seemed to follow me. I found the hole in the fence where Dolores had told me and scrambled through it, tearing my clothes and skin on the rusted wire. On the other side was a vacant lot, and beyond that, the lights of the city. I didn't know exactly where the state police station was, but I had to get as far from the mansion as possible before they discovered my escape. I walked through unfamiliar streets, avoiding the main avenues for fear of Mrs. Vance's guards or the local police on her payroll. After what felt like an eternity, I stopped in a deserted park to catch my breath and check what Dolores had given me. The food was simple: some bread, a piece of cheese, an apple. The money was barely enough for a bus ticket, But the real treasure was the black ledger. I looked through it in the dim light of a street lamp. It was a gold mine of incriminating information. Names of boys, dates of acquisition, amounts paid to parents or guardians, bribes to judges, police, officials. There was even a section detailing the fate of each boy. Some sold to farm owners for forced labor, others sent to special clients whose identities were hidden behind initials, and a few marked simply with an X and a date. I knew what that X meant. They were the ones who ended up in anonymous graves when they became inconvenient. With trembling hands, I secured the ledger and started walking again. I had to find the state police station before Mrs. Vance sent her men after me. I reached a busier avenue and saw a payphone. I didn't have change for a call, but a man passing by took pity on me when he saw how desperate I looked and gave me some coins. I dialed the number for the state police that I had memorized. "State police, how can I help you?" The same female voice from before answered. "I need to speak to Captain Evans. It's urgent. I'm Ethan Miller, the boy who called yesterday about Eleanor Vance." There was a pause on the other end, and then, "Captain Evans has been looking for you. Where are you?" I gave him the approximate address, looking at the nearby street signs. "Stay exactly where you are. A patrol car is on its way. Do not move." I hung up and waited by the phone, shivering not just from the cold, but from fear. What if it was a trap? What if Mrs. Vance had insiders in the state police too? What if the people coming were her men, posing as cops? I was about to run when I saw a patrol car approach, its lights flashing but without a siren. It stopped in front of me, and two officers got out. One of them, a middle-aged man with a mustache and a stern but kind gaze, came toward me. "Ethan Miller?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "I'm Captain Evans. You're safe now." The tears I had held back for days finally broke free. Captain Evans put a hand on my shoulder and guided me to the patrol car. "We're taking you to a safe place. Then you're going to tell me everything that happened." At the police station, they gave me hot food, clean clothes, and a medic tended to the cuts and scrapes from my escape. Captain Evans waited patiently until I had calmed down before asking me to tell my story. I told him everything from the beginning, how my father had sold me, the forced marriage plans, the fake documents, the other boys before me, my discovery of the folders with photos of graves, my capture and imprisonment, Dolores's help. "And I have proof," I said finally, pulling out the black ledger. "It's all in here. Names, dates, amounts. It's her personal record of all her crimes." Captain Evans took the ledger and examined it with a grave expression. He looked at his partner, a younger officer. "We have enough for a search warrant, and we need protection for this boy and for the woman who helped him." "Dolores." "What happens now?" I asked. "We're going to the mansion with a warrant. We'll arrest Eleanor Vance and search the entire property for more evidence. In the meantime, you'll stay here under police protection." "And Dolores? She helped me escape. She'll be in danger when they find out I'm gone." "We'll take care of her first," he promised. "We won't let anything happen to the woman who helped you." That night, I slept for the first time in days without fear. I knew I wasn't completely safe, that Mrs. Vance had many powerful contacts, but at least I wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Captain Evans returned with news. "We raided the mansion last night," he informed me, "but we were too late. Eleanor Vance was gone. It seems she fled shortly after discovering your escape. She took documents and valuables, but she left behind a lot of incriminating evidence." My heart sank. She escaped? Now what? "We've issued a nationwide arrest warrant. Her photo is at every police station and border crossing. She won't be able to leave the country easily. And Dolores, is she okay?" The captain smiled slightly. "She's safe. We found her when we arrived at the mansion. She feigned surprise at your escape, but she gave us valuable information about where more documents might be hidden. She's now under police protection, just like you." It was a relief to know she was safe, but Mrs. Vance's escape worried me deeply. With her contacts and resources, she could hide for a long time, and as long as she was free, I would be in danger. "What will happen to me now?" I asked. "For now, you'll stay in a youth shelter under police protection. We're going to try to locate your sisters to make sure they're safe too." "And my father? He sold me." Captain Evans nodded grimly. He will be investigated and will face charges. What he did is a serious crime. I felt no satisfaction at the thought of my father in prison, only a deep sadness. What would happen to my sisters? Who would take care of them? Can I see my sisters when you find them? We'll do our best, he promised. But first, we have to make sure they're safe and well cared for. The following days were a whirlwind of statements, identifying documents and meetings with social workers. They showed me photos of other boys mentioned in Mrs. Vance's ledger, asking if I had seen them at the mansion. I only recognized one, the small boy I had seen the day I pretended to be sick. A week after my escape, Dolores visited me at the shelter. She was thinner and paler, but she smiled when she saw me. "You're okay," she said, hugging me. "Thank God, you're okay." "Thanks to you," I replied. "Without your help, I'd be on that farm down south right now." Dolores sat across from me. "The police have found other boys, in Mrs. Vance's factories and farms. Some had been there for years, working like slaves. They're freeing them one by one." It was good news in the midst of so much darkness. At least some of them would get a second chance, like me. "Have they found Mrs. Vance?" Dolores shook her head. "Not yet, but they've arrested many of her accomplices. Mr. Wallace, Judge Navarro, several local cops. Her network is crumbling." That gave me some satisfaction. Even if the head of the snake had escaped, at least its body was being destroyed. A month later, my sisters were located. They were living with an aunt in a nearby town. My father had been arrested and was facing charges of child trafficking. The reunion with my sisters was bittersweet. They had found out what our father had done and couldn't understand it. Lily, the oldest, hugged me, crying. "You were right," she said. "I heard that conversation with the father clearly. I tried to tell our aunt, but she didn't believe me." I hugged them both, promising that no one would separate us again. The months passed, and the case of Eleanor Vance became national news. It was discovered that she had been buying children, forging documents, and exploiting minors for over 20 years. Her human trafficking network extended across several states and even crossed borders. My testimony was crucial in dismantling that network. I testified in trials against corrupt judges, bought cops, and officials who had looked the other way. Every time I took the stand, I felt fear, but also determination. For every boy who hadn't been able to escape, for every life destroyed, I had to speak. 6 months after my escape, the news we had been waiting for arrived. Eleanor Vance had been captured in a Central American country and extradited to the United States to face justice. The day I saw her for the first time in the courtroom, I almost didn't recognize her. Without her makeup, her jewels, her air of superiority, she looked much older and smaller. But her eyes, when they met mine, were still the same. Cold, calculating, and full of hate. She didn't intimidate me. I looked her straight in the eye as I recounted to the judge everything I had lived through, everything I had discovered. When I presented the black ledger and explained its contents, I saw something I had never seen in her before. Fear. The trial lasted for weeks. Horrors that even I didn't know about came to light. Testimonies from other boys who had survived her network, evidence of systematic abuse, records of transactions involving powerful figures in politics and business. Finally, the verdict came. Guilty on all charges. The sentence, 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole. At her age, it meant she would die behind bars. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, only rage at having been defeated. "This isn't over," she muttered as she passed me. "I have friends who will find you." Captain Evans, who was standing beside me, answered for me. "Her friends are being arrested one by one, ma'am. Your empire has fallen." After the trial, my life changed completely. My sisters and I were adopted by a wonderful family who worked with a victim protection organization. I was able to go back to school, to reclaim some of my lost childhood, though the emotional scars would take years to heal. Dolores also rebuilt her life. With the reward money she received for helping dismantle Mrs. Vance's network, she was able to open a small business and bring her family to live with her. My father was sentenced to 15 years in prison. For a long time, I refused to visit him. I couldn't forgive what he had done. But over the years and with the help of therapy, I came to understand that he too had been a victim of poverty, of desperation, of a system that offered no alternatives. 10 years after those events, I returned to the town where I was born. The old shack where I grew up was gone, torn down to build new houses, but the memories remained. Some good, most painful. I visited my mother's grave. I silently told her everything that had happened. I promised her that I had survived, that I had become a man she could be proud of. Then I went to the prison where my father was serving his sentence. He was aged, consumed by guilt and remorse. "Ethan," he said when he saw me, his voice breaking, "I didn't expect you to come." "I didn't expect to either," I answered honestly. "What I did to you, there's no forgiveness for it." "I'm not here to offer forgiveness," I said. "I'm here to close this chapter of my life." We talked for an hour. He told me about his life in prison, about how he had tried to redeem himself by helping other inmates learn to read and write. He asked about my sisters, about my life. When we said goodbye, there were no hugs or tears, just a mutual acknowledgement that we had both survived, in our own ways, the consequences of his actions. "Take care of yourself, son," he said as I was leaving. "You too," I replied, and I felt a weight lift from my heart. Years later, when I finished law school, I decided to specialize in cases of child trafficking and exploitation. I wanted to use my experience to help other children trapped in similar situations, to give them the voice that I almost didn't have. I worked with international organizations, testified before government commissions, and helped draft stricter laws against human trafficking. Every time I managed to get a child out of an abusive situation, I felt like I was making up for a small part of the horror that others had suffered. Eleanor Vance died in prison 15 years into her sentence. I felt no joy or sadness upon hearing the news, only the certainty that justice, though delayed, had arrived. The day I turned 40, I received an unexpected letter. It was from one of the boys who had been rescued from Mrs. Vance's factories. He was now a grown man with a family of his own. "Thank you for your bravery," the letter said. "Thank you for speaking up when everyone else was silent. You saved my life without ever knowing me." That night, sitting on my porch and looking up at the stars, I thought about the 14-year-old boy I once was, scared, sold by his own father, trapped in a nightmare. I thought of all the children who had gone through the same thing, and of those who, thanks to our efforts, would never have to experience it. I remembered Dolores's words on the night of my escape. "Run and don't look back." I had run, yes, but I had also looked back to make sure no one else would have to run like I did. Life taught me that the deepest wounds can heal, even if they leave scars. That the densest darkness can give way to light. That even the most painful stories can have, if not a happy ending, then at least one where justice prevails. At 60 years old, sitting here in my rocking chair, sharing my story with the world, I know that 14-year-old boy would be proud of the man he became. A man who never forgot, who never gave up, who transformed his pain into purpose. There are scars that never completely fade. There are nights when the memories return as nightmares. But every morning when I wake up in my own house, with my own life, making my own decisions, I remember that I am free. And that freedom, won at such a high price, is the most valuable treasure I possess. This is my story, the story of a boy who was sold and a man who set himself free. I tell it not to inspire pity, but so that others might find in it the strength to fight against injustice, to protect the vulnerable, and to remember that even in the darkest night, there is always the possibility of dawn. If this story impacted you, subscribe to my channel, Whispers of Experience, and share it so that more people can hear these testimonies. Your support helps me continue to give a voice to those who were never heard.